Hi, my name's Justin Chalfant. I'm the founder here at PatchMyPC. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to set up our Intune product to publish applications and third-party updates. The first thing that you're going to want to do is go ahead and grab our latest MSI for our publisher. So if you go to /docs, that will give you the download link where you can download the latest MSI. Now in my case, we're going to be installing our product on a Windows 10 VM instead of Windows Server. So if you're only using the Intune features, you do have the ability to install in a Windows 10 64-bit client without the need to install a server. The only prerequisite we have for Windows 10 64-bit is you do have to install the optional Windows feature RSAT Windows Server Update Services. So this will just give us the APIs that we need in order to understand the way that our updates are created. So we'll go ahead and pause the video while this installation of RSAT completes. It shouldn't take but a minute or two. So the installation of RSAT is now complete for Windows Server Update Services. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the MSI that we downloaded from our website. So that's going to be our installer, and it's about 5 megabytes. The installation is pretty simple, so we'll go over some of the basics. Now in our case, we are going to be performing an installation where we only want to enable the Intune features. So we are going to enable Intune standalone mode. What this is going to do is it's going to disable some of the configuration manager applications and updates feature that are not specific to Intune, and it will disable some of the other prerequisite checks that would generally be performed. We're going to leave the default for the installation location and then complete the install. And now we're going to go ahead and launch the publisher. Okay, on that, if you get the UAC prompt, just choose yes to that. Now we now have the product installed, and we're going to go over some of the basic installation post steps. Now the first thing that you're going to want to do is determine whether or not you want to use trial mode. So if we enable public trial mode, what this is going to do, it's going to limit the number of products that you can publish, but it does not require you to sign up for any free trial or anything like that. Now, the more common option that we see is customers will come out and evaluate our product. They'll go ahead and do the 30-day full trial. So the only thing you have to do here is submit the full trial, and then you'll get a custom license that's unique for you that's valid for 30 days. So what I'm going to do is come back here, and I'm going to paste in one of the license URLs that you would receive if you did go through and do a full trial, for example. So you would have your own unique license for your 30-day trial. Now, since we are not using any of the WSUS features for third-party updates for Configuration Manager, we can essentially ignore the piece about certificate management here. So no need to configure any of that if you are Intune only. Now, by entering the full 30-day trial URL, that is going to give you access to publish every single product within our catalog for evaluation purposes. So the next step that you're going to want to do is go over to the Intune apps or the Intune updates, and we need to configure our options that are going to allow us to connect to your Intune tenant. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is get the login information that we need in order to connect to your specific Intune tenant. So in order to find this, I'm going to go over to our Intune tenant, and then we want to go to the tenant administration. And then within the tenant status, it's going to give you the tenant name specific to your environment. So what we want to do is go back to our publisher, and we need to enter the tenant domain name within this option here. So we're simply going to replace that with our full tenant name. So in my example, our domain name is intunecustomerdemos1.onmicrosoft.com. If this was our production tenant, it would be something like patchmypc.com, and it would of course be different for your tenant. Now the next thing that we need to do is go in and configure an application registration for Azure AD that's going to give us the necessary permissions in order for us to connect and create applications and updates within your Intune tenant. So we do have a KB link directly within the UI that will cover the specific permissions that you need. So this will be a good option instead of following along with the video. If you want to go and look at some specific screenshots and the permissions that I'm going to set here, you may also want to have the KB up as well. So within Azure AD, let me just jump over here. We need to go to our app registrations, and then we need to create a new registration within Azure AD app registrations. So in my case, we'll walk through that. We're going to give it a name. We're just going to call it Patch My PC Intune Demo. You can call this whatever you want that would make sense to let you know that this is what gives the Patch My PC publisher the necessary permissions in order to connect to your tenant. The default option should generally be okay for most environments, and I'm going to go ahead and click Register. The next thing that you're going to want to do is go ahead and copy your application client ID and store that somewhere safe. So that's going to be something that we're going to need within our UI. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that, and I'm going to go ahead and paste that within the application ID section of our tool. Now that we have that copied, I'm going to go ahead and configure the permissions that we're going to need in order to talk to Microsoft Intune using the Graph API. So if we go ahead and click on Add, and a quick option here, you can choose the search option, and that's going to give you the option where you can search for the specific permissions that we need. Now what we're going to need to choose here is the Microsoft Graph. So we want to choose Application Permissions, and now within this view we can go ahead and search for Device Management, and that's going to be the first set of permissions that we need. So we're going to need the Application Read All, and then we're going to need the Application Device Management Apps Read Write. So we're going to need to have permissions in order to talk to your tenant in order to create apps and read apps. The next thing that we're going to need is access to devices. So under the Device Management, Manage Devices, we need the Read All if you want to give us the ability to automatically create assignments. That will give us the permissions that we need to query the inventory on those devices. And then finally, we will want to have the group option. So under group, we want the ability to read all, and that's going to allow us to target groups within Azure AD, which we'll look at later. And you will probably also want to check out the KB just in case we've implemented any additional features that may require additional permissions while you're doing the setup. Okay, so this is what the permissions should look like. We should have apps read R, apps write, device management read, and then group read all. That's going to be the 4 permissions that we currently need. And then you're going to need to have an admin consent and grant those permissions. In our case, we are currently an admin, but if that would be managed by another person within your org, you would need to get that approved. Now, the next thing that we need to do is get the client secret key. So what you would do, you would click New Client Secret, and then you would have an option to copy that. So I'm going to create that and pause the video while we create it. The only option that you will get when you click Create is whether you want the key to last for 1, 2, or have it never expire. So depending on your needs, you can choose whichever option makes sense for you. Okay, so the client secret key has been created. Now I did already use the copy option that you're going to get right after you click create and then refresh the page so that we would not see the secret key here. Now within the publisher, you can now come in and you can paste that secret key that you created within the Azure App Registration and then click Test. And that will let you know if we're able to successfully connect to your Azure tenant to be able to connect to Intune. Now there are a few additional configurations within the Intune configuration that you can configure here. The first one's going to be whether or not you want to choose to digitally sign the PowerShell detection method and or requirement script with a code signing certificate. So we do make use of PowerShell for our detection method and requirements. So if you do want to code sign it, you can choose the certificate here if you require clients to only run code signed PowerShell scripts. We then do have some options where when we use our Intune application feature, we can choose whether or not we want to copy any previous assignments from a previous version of an application to a new version when we automatically create an update for you, both for applications and updates. We then also have an option where we can delete the assignment from any older apps or updates when a new version's out so that you can ensure that you're only targeting the latest version when you're configuring your deployments. And then lastly, we do have some options where you can choose whether or not you want to delete any previous applications that we've created or delete any previous updates when a new version comes out. The default settings here can work pretty well for most environments. And then the last option, so this was just related to us enabling Intune standalone mode, where we disabled the Configuration Manager Updates and Configuration Manager Applications tab. Now, once we start publishing applications, if we run the Intune App Utility, this can be quite helpful, and we'll look at this once the applications have been published, where we can look at all the assignments for all the applications within Intune. So at this point, we're pretty much ready to go. So we can choose which applications and which updates that we want to start publishing. Now, the key difference between applications in Intune and updates in Intune is, from our perspective, the apps are designed where you can either make them available or required, and users could have those apps get installed when they're not already there. So this would be your traditional deployment where a user could go into company portal and install the applications themselves. The way that our Intune Updates is going to work is that's going to have a requirement setting that we automatically configure for you, where the Win32 application for the update version is only applicable when there's an older version already installed. So this would allow you to do broader assignments to ensure that you can patch any applications even if they're not installed from an application that you originally deployed, for example. So it makes it more like a traditional update experience if you were comparing it to Configuration Manager, where it's got the applicability built in for you. Okay, so to start off, I'm going to go ahead and go over to my Intune apps. And let me just apply those settings for our Intune configurations that we just performed. So within the Intune apps, these are going to be where you can enable products that will be created as a Win32 application that you can deploy within Intune. So what I'm going to do is show some of the custom configurations that you can perform that can be quite helpful when you perform your deployments. So we do have some right-click options that can be applied at the all products level. So for example, if you wanted to automatically close any application just to ensure that there's nothing in use, you can right-click and you can configure that. So in our case, we'll leave that default, but we are going to enable some options like deleting public desktop shortcuts for any products that would put a public icon, where we don't want that to be on all users' desktop, for example. We can automatically disable updates for any products that support that. One of the most helpful options is logging. So what we can do in this scenario is we can automatically create the logging parameter for both MSI and EXE-based products within our catalog and automatically append that to the installation command line and have it save in whichever location that you want to standardize on for any log. So this can be quite helpful. For example, if you have some products that are not able to install and they're giving you bad exit codes, you can actually go look at the vendor's install log instead of just getting generic like 1603 errors that there was a fatal error, for example. And then probably one of the more helpful options is we can automatically assign all the applications from the all products level if you wanted to have like a standard assignment. So for example, since these are applications, I'm going to go ahead and make these available to all users within my organization for any products that I enable. So that will ensure that they're available within company portal where the user can go in and configure it. Now, if you want, if you click the group that you deployed, you can also configure different options like restart periods and things like that, depending on what you need. In addition to that, you can also choose whether or not you want to show notifications, how you want to configure that, when you want it to be available, and just a variety of different configurations. And then you can also configure required or uninstall based deployments if you want. So since we apply these at the all products level, these will recursively apply for any products or vendors that we enable down the chain. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and enable Google Chrome as a product. So we're going to do the 64-bit version of Chrome. Now, when we right-click that, we're going to see that those options have been applied at the global level. Now, once we get to the product individually, we do have 3 additional customizations that can be applied at the individual product level. So for example, if you wanted to modify command lines, or if you wanted to add transform files, or if you wanted to add a custom pre or post script to do anything that you wanted, you can apply that at the individual product level if you do need to have things more customized. In our case, we're going to leave everything default for Google Chrome. Okay, and then we'll just enable a couple of other products. So let's take a look at Microsoft Edge. So we can just do a Control F and find that. We're going to enable that product. Let's also enable SQL Management Studio. So let's go ahead and enable version 19 of that. Then we can also go ahead and enable Power BI and apply that. And let's just see if we have any other examples that we may want to include in this demo. Let's go ahead and do Adobe Reader and Adobe Air. So we'll do those 3 products. So at this point, these are going to be published and they're going to automatically create assignments for us in Intune based on that right-click option, for example. So that's going to have it automatically ready and deployed for our end users. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to jump over to our Intune Updates feature. And from the All Products level, we're going to go ahead and enable similar options. So let's go ahead and choose, actually, let's go ahead and duplicate. So if you wanted to, you could copy all the products and settings from the Intune Apps tab and have them automatically applied. Now, in my case, I just wanted to copy the right-click options, including the logging, but I don't necessarily for this demo want to enable all the same products. So what we're going to do for the updates is I'm going to enable 7-zip because we do have a client with an outdated version of 7-zip that we can demo. So we're going to go ahead and choose that. And the only difference for assignments with the updates are that we do not give the option for available assignments. Since these are only going to be applicable when an old version is installed, we do not want to make them available and we only will allow you to create required assignments. So in my case, if you had a specific Azure AD group that you wanted to target, you do have the ability to do that. For this example though, for 7-zip, I'm just going to say I want to target all devices, for instance. We do have similar options here. So let's say that you wanted to test these updates. You could do things like staggered deployments where you say, I want this group to install 1 day from now. In our case, we're going to leave that default. And then, for example, you can maybe have another staging group where you say, I want it 3 days from now. And then maybe for the all devices, for example, maybe you have a 7-day deadline where you could kind of get some staggered deployments to ensure that you have testing phases, similar to the way that ADRs work if you're coming from a configuration manager environment. Okay. And then we'll apply that. So currently we have about 5 products that are configured as an application for initial deployment, and then we have 7-zip configured as an update. Now, before we run our first synchronization, we do have some options pre-configured that you're probably going to want to go over. So you have the ability to create a Teams webhook. So let's go ahead and test that, and we can see that we can successfully post to our channel. So we do have a guide within the UI if you want to go over the webhook configuration. And then we also have emails configured as well. So these options can be great because when the applications or updates get published, you will automatically get notified that there's been changes within your environment. Okay. So now that we've got our notifications and our apps and updates configured, I'm going to go ahead and run my initial synchronization manually within the sync schedule by clicking Run Publishing Service Sync. So what's going to happen now is it's going to start creating applications within Intune. So if we go into our tenant now and look under our applications, we're going to see that we don't currently have anything configured. But within the publisher, this is going to automatically start a synchronization in the background where we're going to be able to see the applications and updates getting published within Intune. So we'll give this a few minutes and then we'll come back and see how this looks. While we're waiting for that, I did go ahead and enable Debug Logging. And if you want to look at the log, you can see different information like the installer getting downloaded from the vendor's website. And then we'll also be able to see some upload status when the application is actually being automatically uploaded into Microsoft Intune within the log files. Of course, you're not going to have to review this. You can get notified when everything happens, but just if you want to see what's going on in the background, you can get some information about what's happening, especially if you have debug logging enabled. Okay, so it looks like the Adobe Reader installation is now created as an application. So if we come back over to Intune and click refresh, we can see that we have Adobe Acrobat Reader already created and already assigned. Adobe Air is still in the process of being created, but while we wait for that, if we go ahead and look at this, we can see that we have some information already pre-configured and it's already actually assigned for you based on that assignment that we created using the right-click option. We can also see that all the metadata fields are already pre-configured, And at this point, it is actually already deployed and ready for your users to use. If we come and look at the assignments, we can see that we automatically created the assignment for you directly when we created the app, so that you don't have to worry about manually going in and deploying all these different applications once we've automatically created them. So we'll wait a few more minutes and then we'll come back once all our applications as well as our 7-zip update is created. And we can also see that within the Microsoft Teams alerts, we are getting notified when each of those applications are being created. So for example, we can see that when Adobe Reader was created as an application, we can see that it got automatically created. We can see, for example, it had different CVEs that are directly linkable to the National Vulnerability Database. Same thing for Google Chrome. We can also click right out to the release notes of the vendor within that Teams alert as well. And same thing for Chrome. We're also going to get notified about classification, severity level, as well as any CVEs will be directly clickable where you can learn more about that update or application. Now, one thing I did miss while we're waiting for the applications and updates to be created, we do have an option where if you click the database scan, we can automatically scan inventory based on Intune and expose some of the data that we detected for your installed applications within your organization. So this can be a helpful feature if you did want to try to enable products automatically based on those products being enabled or installed within your environment. Now, one thing I do want to note about this feature, currently in Microsoft Intune, the inventory feature does only enable inventory for products that are MSI-based installers. So currently in our product, we have about 50-50 for vendors that use MSI versus vendors that use EXE. So until Intune inventory is extended to include all installed products, including EXE-based installers, this may not be a complete list, but it should be insightful for any of the MSI-based products. So just keep that in mind. So at this point, our synchronization just completed. So we can see that we got our final Microsoft Teams alert for 7-zip as an update. And then we can also see that we had our email alert letting us know all the different applications and updates that were published. So now if we go to our Microsoft Intune applications and click refresh, we'll see that we have all our applications that we have assigned, and then we also have our update. Now, a key difference that you can notice right away is any application that was created designed for a software update, we do prefix with update for. So if we come in here and look at that, what we'll see is that the difference between that version of the application that's the update is that we do also have a requirement script that's configured within that application, and that's going to be what ensures that we only make this update applicable based on an older version being installed. So that's why we have a required assignment where it could still be deployed broadly, but based on our rules, it would never be applicable unless there's an older version. So that's going to allow you to target broader and make sure that machines that are out of date automatically get this, even if they weren't initially deployed using Intune. So now we're going to log into another Windows 10 client that is enrolled within this Windows Intune tenant. So what we can see here is we are going to have an outdated version of 7-zip, version 18.01, that should be applicable for our update. Now, since we're just logging in, there's probably a good chance looks like the applications are already showing up and ready to go. So for example, let's go ahead and take a look, and let's say that we wanted to install Google Chrome because it's not already here. So this would function just like any other Win32 application that you may have manually created in Microsoft Intune. So we can see we have our icons, we have our URLs directly for the vendor's application. So everything would be ready to go and you'd have a great user experience within Company Portal. So we'll give this a few minutes while it installs, and then we'll come back and we'll take a look to see whether or not the update for 7-zip has also been applied and show you some log files on how that all works. All right, so we can see Google Chrome has already been installed, and then we'll come back and take a look at 7-zip once it's evaluated the Intune update. And while we're waiting for that update to apply, some of the log files that will be relevant for us is within program data, we do automatically create our Patch My PC Intune logs, which will show the installation of any of the applications or updates, as well as any of the customizations. So for example, we can see Google Chrome and we can see exactly when that got installed, and we can see things like the exit code that was performed. Now, since we had the right-click option as well for Google Chrome to create the MSI-based log, we can also see that we have the verbose MSI log within the folder that we defined as well. And based on the logs, it looks like 7-zip has also applied in the background. So there we go. We can refresh and see that the required update was also automatically installed in the background. So if we come over here and let's just do one more application. Let's go ahead and say we want to install Microsoft Power BI Desktop. So let's go ahead and install that. Okay, so within the Patch My PC script runner, which is what performs the installations, we can see that we've automatically started the installation for Power BI. Now, if we go to our client install logs, we can also see that we've already got the logging for Power BI's installer already logging out to the folder that we defined as well, in case we ever had to troubleshoot. Hopefully things work just fine, so we'll come back in a minute once the installation is complete. There we go. And within the log, we can also see, because we enabled that option to delete the public shortcut, not sure if you guys saw it, but you can go back if not, we did have a Power BI desktop shortcut right after the install, and then we automatically delete it from the public desktop based on that right-click customization action. All right, so that's pretty much how the apps and the updates will work on the client side. The only other piece is if we come back in here and go to our options and then run our Intune App Manager utility, we will be able to come in here and look at the status of all the applications and updates within the tool. So we do have some additional columns that you can also add depending on what you want to see as well. Now, what can be helpful here is we do have the ability to export this to a CSV. So let's say that we wanted to export that to our desktop. And what we can do with this data is we have a Power BI template that you'll be able to download from our website. Check the description in the video below. And what you can do, you can load that exported CSV file. And what we can do is load that into Power BI, and we can expose the patch compliance data within your organization. So this is something that traditionally wasn't really available. And the key reason for that is because if we actually look at Microsoft Intune, there's not really any good insights that we can look at all applications or updates at once. You would have to go and individually select each application you wanted to monitor. And this is where you could get some of the statistics that could be quite helpful in these reports. So what we did is we can bulk query every application, export that to a CSV, and then we can expose all these different apps and patches. So this is an example of one of our production environments where we've been using the Intune patching feature for a couple months now, and we can see things like how many updates have been published, how many of those are not currently assigned to a group in Intune, how many are installed and how many are pending or required. And then you can come in and you can break down and say you wanted to look at the different updates within a specific month. You can get very detailed, see things like CVEs, severity levels, things like that. So from here, we're trying to make an option to expose the results in a way that traditionally is not possible, at least natively, within Microsoft Intune. So we have this both available for patching, which would be our updates, as well as the applications. So even if you wanted to monitor all the different deployments that you've performed for applications and how many are installed or failed or required, you can check that for even the normal applications as well to see how things are looking from that regard. And then the only other thing to mention, once you've performed the configuration for all the products and applications and updates that you want, everything is going to be totally automated going forward. So by default, we run a synchronization every night at 7 p.m. And let's say there was a new update for any of the products that you've enabled either as an update or an app, they would automatically get published and automatically get assigned to the groups that you've defined. So that pretty much covers the video. The Intune Updates is a relatively new feature that we've recently released. So stay posted. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of exciting updates from that perspective as well in the near future. Once again, just want to thank you for watching and hope you enjoyed the video.